The California Gold Rush, one of the USA's largest events in history, which expanded the culture, profit, and the diversity of the United States of America. What was the California Gold Rush, and what made it so amazing? It was not the first gold rush to occur in the United States, but it did define the United States for the rest of its existence. The official definition of the gold rush is a situation in which many people go quickly to a place where gold has been discovered because they hope to find more gold and become rich. Thousands of people immigrated to California for their chance of fortune and prosperity. They all wished to go home with something. Sutter's full name was actually John Augustus Sutter. He was originally from Germany, but moved to the United States due to the extreme debt he was in. In 1834, he sailed to New York and then decided to move out west to see if he could make more money. He settled in Missouri, where he traded along the Santa Fe Trail for 3 years. In 1839, Sutter believed that his wealth would be in California, so he set off on the Oregon Trail. This led him to Oregon, where he took a ship to San Francisco, California. On the ship, he visited Hawaii and Alaska before reaching his destination. When in California, Sutter was granted permission by the governor to purchase land. Sutter was given 50,000 acres of land. This land would serve as an all-American community in an entirely Native American area. Sutter's Fort became a popular spot for Americans traveling out west. Sutter employed these people so they could work for him and make their own wealth as well. The highest point of Sutter's career was his discovery on January 24, 1848. This discovery changed American history. Mr. James Wilson Marshall was born in 1810 in New Jersey. He worked as a carpenter and wheelwright. At the age of 18, he moved out west to become a farmer. He settled in Kansas. He was unsuccessful for several years and decided to move to California. In 1845, Marshall moved to Sutter's Community for Americans and was given a job as a carpenter. Marshall became very successful. In 1848, Marshall formed a partnership with Sutter to create a sawmill along the American River. While checking to see the land the mill would be built on, Marshall looked down and saw gold. Once John Sutter realized what happened with the wealth that Marshall had discovered, he told him to keep it a secret, although the secret soon got out. The paper will be published on March 15, 1848. The article about the discovery of gold at Sutter's Mill is published but does not stir up any excitement. This helped spread the news about the gold that could make everyone a fortune. Everyone is in disbelief that gold could be found so easily. As people passed by Samuel Brannan, they saw gold dust in a bottle in his hand. They stopped and stared in shock. Seeing the actual gold that had been written about made this claim real. After witnessing this, the gold fever spread. Families in California, New York, Massachusetts, and all over the country became fascinated with this revelation. Males throughout the United States almost instantly quit their jobs, left their homes, and set out on their journey for gold. However, there was a problem with getting to California. Since most of the males that left their jobs and families for the gold rush came from areas close to the Atlantic coast, the trek to California would be a difficult one, especially due to the lack of technology that was available with transportation. The early 49ers had a limited amount of options on their way to get there, which were either to go by ship, by horse, or by walking.
People took all kinds of ways, but again, these clipper ships held out the most appeal because obviously during the gold rush, time is of the essence. You want to get there as quickly as possible. You want to get there before other people.
Two main routes in order to get to California, one being the Panama route and the other the Cape Horn route. The Panama route started in New York, went around what is now known as the Dominican Republic, through Panama City, and up to San Francisco. It was very uncommon until 1851 to have ship shortages from Panama to San Francisco. Common diseases that occurred during the Panama route was yellow fever, malaria, dysentery, and cholera. Cape Horn route started in Boston and Charleston. The ships that started in Boston had an extra stop into New Orleans before they continued onto the Cape Horn route. So from Boston and Charleston around South America and to San Francisco. Common diseases that occurred were scurvy and cholera.
And it wasn't extraordinarily expensive either.
A lot of people use wagons to go across the Oregon to California Trail.
Many men felt that they could make it by going to California and starting to mine for gold. A popular way to get to California was by going through the Oregon Trail. The pioneers and the 49ers had used the Oregon Trail, which was the main overland migration routes on the North American continent.
This was a very, very dangerous trail. It took a long time to get there as well. People took the risk of dying along the way.
The 5 to 6 month journey spanned over half the continent as the wagon trail proceeded 2,170 miles, going through territories which are now known as Missouri, Kansas, Nebraska, Wyoming, Idaho, and Oregon. However, due to the extremely high usage of it, wildlife suffered due to grass supply exhaustion, and waterholes were destroyed, polluted, and became riddled with disease.
Estimated about 10% of people who went on the Oregon Trail didn't make it. And most of the people who didn't make it died of disease or died of exposure. A lot of people always wonder, how many people did Indians kill? And they killed actually a very small percentage.
The miners that traveled to California had to abide by non-legislative laws called the Miners' 10 Commandments. These were rules every miner had to follow. Although they were not official, they had to be respected and carried out. To begin, the first commandment stated that no man should have more claims than the ones that he already has.
Everyone say hi, Pico!
The second commandment was to only tell the truth about themselves and others. One that lied was often judged and looked down upon, isolated among the miners. The third commandment went on to say that one should not go prospecting their own claims and give them out. It also stated that if a miner gambles their own gold and money, they are responsible for their actions. The fourth commandment stated that a miner should not forget what their families and friends are doing at home, and to not forget them as their family. The fifth commandment said that one should not only think about how much gold one has, or how one can get it quicker, but more what they will do with it, such as help their parents, which was a common belief of the mining community. The sixth commandment mentioned that one should never kill another miner, nor himself. The seventh commandment pleaded that a miner should never want to go home early or be discouraged to mine because one day they will go home a successful man. The eighth commandment told miners to never steal from another miner, never borrow what they cannot give back, and never distract them from their work. A miner would be punished for this. It would not be uncommon for a miner to be killed. The ninth commandment explained to miners that they should never lie to other miners about a good mining spot when it is not actually beneficial. The 10th and final commandment said that one should never forget the maiden in his life, and that they will always love them whether or not they could do better because of how they waited for them patiently. It added that a miner can never do any harm to another miner's maiden. With this huge influx of population, California was eligible to become a state of the United States of America.
A lot of men ended up staying in California, and in fact this caused a lot of political problems later because nobody expected California to fill up so quickly.
California would eventually become the 31st state in the Union. By the end of the gold rush, 300,000 people had moved to California from their home states. The Manifest Destiny was a piece of writing which discussed how the rest of the continent deserved to be part of the United States of America. The Americans believed that God actually wanted the Americans to stretch over the continent. The idea of the Manifest Destiny helped promote Americans to travel to California, alongside with the ideas of fortune. The Manifest Destiny resulted by creating mass immigration to California and other parts of what would become the United States of America. A miner's camp was a very unruly place.
You see a lot of rise in different industries, such as gambling. You see rise in industries of prostitution.
Riddled with disease and sin. There were criminals everywhere, booze, gambling, and brothels filled with prostitutes. How did the miners mine for gold during the California gold rush? The miners would spend extremely long days digging up mud, dirt, and stones while standing in ice. In the beginning, the 49ers mined for gold using panning. The miners would enter into a stream, and using a pan similar to a deep pie plate, gravel was swirled and the heavier gold would fall to the bottom of the pan. Although there would have been advances in extracting gold, many gold prospectors would still use this technique to prospect the land and river to try and see if there was gold available.
Just panning, right, going in there with basically a sift you use on the beach, and sifting through to try to find a shell or two. Same idea, but you're sifting through to try to find, pieces of gold.
Although some people made fortunes from mining gold and finding gold, many other people used the mass amount of people to make their own fortunes, which was gained by selling goods necessary for the many who were found there. Since so many miners were making such a large amount of money, which rose from about $1 a day to $16 a day, prices on basic goods soared.
Some of the best ways to make money are selling food to miners, selling equipment to miners.
At a boarding house near a mine, a miner would pay $43 for an ordinary breakfast, which regularly cost 25 cents before the gold rush occurred in that area. From 1849 to 1855, an estimated $300 million worth of gold was taken from the California goldfields. An incredible amount of wealth was achieved through mining gold. One of the most successful of these merchants was a man named Samuel Brannan. Samuel Brannan was born on March 2nd, 1818. He was a Mormon, a businessman, and a journalist that realized that he would have to do something larger than mining gold.
He's going to buy up all the pickaxes in the area, shovels. He's going to know this, so he can now increase the supply of it. The same, and increase the price of it. Same idea as, let's say, where you have Hurricane Sandy, where people are selling, they're price gouging. They're selling generators for 2-3 times the amount of money that you actually pay for them.
He bought all the mining supplies he could find and filled his store at Sutter's Fort with buckets, pans, heavy clothing, foodstuffs, and similar provisions that the miners would need in the miner camps to mine. However, not only did thousands of Americans eventually move to California, but there was a huge amount of immigration that arrived from foreign countries. After news spread throughout the whole country and the world, by the end of the summer of 1849, the first gold seekers were arriving from outside California. People from all over America, Hawaii, Peru, and Chile.
Other people came from other areas of the world as well, and they would try to come through, which the Panama Canal isn't built yet at the time, so people try to come through the Amazon rainforest, but they try to come through and navigate through those rivers. Many people didn't make it there because of cholera, because of malaria, because not only that, but you're navigating through a horrible area.
Came to bask in the gold. Land surrounding the United States hurried to get as much land as they possibly could. Even though over 80,000 immigrants had arrived in California, gold discoveries were still made daily, with many people still making their own fortunes. However, the gold rush did not just reach to the edges of the Western Hemisphere. Gold fever spread throughout every country and nation that had access for this information. By the 1850s, miners were coming from places all over the world, such as Britain, other European nations, Australia, and even China. The people of China were most attracted to this California gold rush. By 1851, over 25,000 Chinese citizens came to California to seek out wealth. When they heard about this abundance of gold, Chinese people began emigrating to California, not to settle, but only to gain as much gold as they could. The way Chinese immigrant miners made their money from gold was that they melted the gold and transformed it into household items, such as bowls, silverware, and plates. All was going well for the Chinese. They were making money, mining gold, helping others, and living a better life than they previously had. Joaquin Murrieta traveled to California in 1850 to seek out his fortune in gold. He, his wife, and his brother began working in a farm to adjust to life in California. The same year, the foreign miner tax was created, hindering Murrieta from gaining his wealth. Soon after, Murrieta and his family were fired out from the farm. Unable to find another job, Murrieta turned to crime. Murrieta began a group called the Five Joaquins. From 1850 to 1863, his group stole, cattle rustled, and murdered. The group consisted of Joaquin Murrieta and 4 other men named Joaquin. The worst crime committed was when they murdered 19 men, stole 100 horses, and stole over $100,000 worth of gold. Crimes got so bad and life-threatening that the California governor created the California Rangers to catch these criminals. Whoever killed the 5 Joaquins would receive a prize of $5,000. On July 25, 1853, 2 of the Joaquins were killed. Murrieta was alive and left the area to work at a saloon, where miners began to go missing. After 14 miners had been killed and their ears chopped off, Murrieta was identified as the murderer. Murrieta formed a new group and fled. He was never seen again.
Levi Strauss made quite a lot of money selling pans to miners.
Levi Strauss was a tailor from New York. When he heard about the gold rush in California, he moved to San Francisco in March of 1853. He opened a dry goods store to supply citizens with goods that all 117 other dry goods stores could not. One of Strauss's customers suggested making product for miners, because almost everyone in San Francisco mined for gold. Strauss put his skills as a tailor to use and perfected this customer's heavy cotton work pants by adding metal rivets to make the pants more durable. Strauss applied for a patent and obtained it. Levi Strauss & Co. was born. Strauss began making many pairs of these pants and selling them at his dry goods store. Miners began using them, and the word of these jeans spread. By 1873, thousands of miners were wearing Strauss's jeans. The durable material made them ideal for mining. By the end of the gold rush, Strauss has sold over tens of thousands of his jeans, making him one of the most wealthy men of the gold rush era. Mining was not the only way individuals could make money.
Levi Strauss, he's someone that'll go out there not for gold, but he'll go out there and develop his clothing industry. And he'll make tons of money. He'll be a multimillionaire.
The legacy of Levi Strauss still lives on, with everyone owning at least a pair of his jeans. Before the California Gold Rush started, California was largely unoccupied by the immigrants and the Americans who came later to California in large quantities. The population consisted of about 6,500 Californians, people of Spanish or Mexican descent, 700 foreigners or Americans, and the mass of the population consisted of about 275,000 Native Americans. However, even from the beginning of the California Gold Rush, there was a mistreatment and cruelty that was directed at the Native Americans. The first person who discovered gold in their mill, John Sutter, was one of the first people to show violence toward the Native Americans. At his mill, he would kidnap Native Americans who were living near the land that he took, usually from the Miwok tribe. Those Native Americans were put in conditions extraordinarily close to slavery. As payment, they received cheap prices of tin that would only be able to be redeemed from Sutter's store. After the population increased to 222,000 white men, the Native American population plunged drastically. What was once 275,000 Native Americans now became 30,000 Native Americans. The survival rate became only 10%. This was due to the violence shown to the Native Americans during the mining periods. The miners, who were extremely ambitious and determined to become wealthy by getting as much gold as they can, saw the peaceful Native American tribes as competition that could change the outcome of their riches. Miners would go on killing sprees, destroy entire villages, and slaughter at least 50 Native Americans every day. The men, who were lustful since there was only 2% of the population were women, started to rape all of the Native American women. There was a point in the gold rush where there were only 16,000 Native Americans left in California. Throughout the California Gold Rush, there was a turning point, where fortune started becoming harder to get, and the wild, rough land of California started to become more tamed. Many people would argue that this turning point occurred when the married women and children started arriving at California during the 1850s. These women started to clean up California by getting rid of the prostitution, the gambling, and the alcoholism that was occurring. Once these women started arriving, the miners have already removed the top layer of gold from the earth.
First, everyone goes out there to collect the money, but then to collect the gold, but after a year, the gold is pretty much, you find that most people get the most wealth in that first year. By 1850, there's not much else that will be obtained.
All the miners either had to abandon their jobs as miners, or they would join corporations that held the ability to purchase machinery that would be able to go deep into the earth. Year after year, the amount of gold lowered during this time, and the California Gold Rush ceased to exist. John Sutter, one of the people to start the gold fever that spread throughout the world, ironically was very poor towards the end of the gold rush. Once thousands of people were arriving in California, his land was overrun and his provisions were stolen. He eventually moved from California to Washington, D.C. to get as much land as he possibly could in order to get some land back. But nonetheless, he spent his dying days paying off his debts from his disaster involving the California Gold Rush. Imagine sweating in 90-degree weather every day, but never taking a shower or bath. However, that was not enough, considering that the miners always wore long shirts and pants and never changed clothing. They were so smelly that the Native Americans were repulsed by them and thought of them as being uncivilized. Would you pay $100 for a glass of water? Many miners were forced into doing so due to the lack of planning and the hot, dry deserts that appeared on the way there and in California. As much as some people would like to believe, there was no lone wagon traveling across the prairie to reach California. The traffic to get there was worse than traffic that there is currently, with a path filled with wagons day and night, constantly going. The population growth during the gold rush was very rapid. In 1848, the population was about 20,000 people. In 1850, the population of California was about 93,000. In 1852, the population was 223,000. In 1960, the population was at 380,000 people. And in 1870, the population was as high as 560,000 people. All these numbers were provided via the federal census at the time. The California Gold Rush gave the opportunity for individuals to relocate across the continent and start their lives over, making profit through gold, starting businesses, and opening up to many immigrants were some of the many successes of the historic time period that will live on forever.